We want to thank Feel for the Game for providing the platform to have all these presentations live and available for replay. You can check out all the resources over at feelforthegame.com. Our guest today is Brian Rosario, an assistant coach at Pepperdine women's basketball. I think it's really interesting to bring people from all over the country, bringing different perspectives. So I kind of want Coach to introduce himself, start this one off a little bit differently. Usually I do an intro and bio, but Coach, tell us how you got started and where you came from and where you are.
Yeah, so I got started a long time ago. I'm originally from California. Obviously, I got the love for the game from my dad, and it just kind of took off from there. I was a practice player at the University of San Diego. That's where I really got my start in the sense of just wanting to explore what it's like to be a college basketball coach. Kathy Marpy, who was the head coach there, Eric Johnson, Shelly Sheets, Nadine Nastrolio, God, who else was there? Lakeisha Wright. They've all were mentors of really pushing me in a direction. And from there I went on, and my first position was assistant coach at McNeese State. Then kind of made my way up to Kentucky at Cumberland College, coached in the Ivy League after that for a couple years before coming back to the WCC at Loyola Marymount. From there, took a time away from the game, and I found myself following a girl to Indiana, my future wife. So it worked, right? She became my wife, and my time in Indiana was very unique because I was able to coach high school and club and really get to know parents and what they were looking for their daughters and whatnot. And then from there, we went to Arizona, became the head coach at Chandler Gilbert before Kristen Dowling gave me a call and was like, hey, do you want to come back home and kind of help me do something at something special at Pepperdine. And so I'm kind of on my third stint in WCC. Pepperdine was my basketball camp about 30 years ago, so I'm dating myself a little bit. But it's good to be back. It's good to be back home and in the conference that I love at a place that I adore, and then obviously with coworkers that I trust and love.
Awesome. So it was the first year with a whole new staff. Can you tell us? And our topic's going to be building culture, so it kind of leads right into it. But before you get into it, can you kind of describe how the first year went altogether?
Yeah, I mean, we inherited a program that, Pepperdine back in the day was a championship level program. I mean, Mark Track, who's now at Southern Cal, I mean, he built it up to be a program that's where kids were looking to go to develop as basketball players and to win championships. But we took over a program that kind of has been on a lull. We inherited a program that had 7 seniors, so it was definitely experience heavy. We knew it was going to be a big year with recruiting, obviously for the 2020 class, but we inherited a great group, hard workers. We made a run late in the season. We were kind of hovering around 500, and then we went on this 5-game win streak, got into the tournament right where we were picked, which was 6th. Ended up winning our first round game and then upsetting the number 3 seed BYU, and got into the semis and lost to my alma mater, San Diego. But I think it was just one of those runs that it was very special. I mean, those kids really adopted us, trusted us, and I think we were like any other basketball team. You want to play your best basketball at the end of the season. So it was a good run, and now we're looking to build off of it.
Awesome. Well, if you want to jump right into it, you can get started.
Awesome. Now, are you able to see my screen?
Not right now.
Let me.
I think I have to maybe cancel the spotlight video. I'm not sure. Try sharing again. I'm not sure.
All right, should be coming up now.
Yep, you are good to go now. Now I see it.
Awesome. Well, Ben, Jeff, I definitely appreciate you, obviously reaching out. Indiana has become a kind of a 3rd, 4th, 5th home for me, obviously with my travels and whatnot. And I think anytime I can give back to the game of basketball for Indiana, for the game in general, is just a unique thing. I think, building culture and building a program is kind of what I found myself into my entire career. I mean, even when I was at San Diego, I was part of a program that was kind of on this upward swing. And my graduation year in '99, they ended up winning it. So I was able to kind of see and be part of a program that, you know, was obviously on the up, but then everything that it entailed doing, right? Found myself in Kentucky, same thing, very good players there. And the head coach, Melissa Irvin, allowed me to kind of come in and help her with building another program, ending with a championship. Same thing happened with Cornell and LMU. And I think specifically what I'd like to talk about today is I'm not reinventing the wheel at by any means, but a couple things that I do want to share is just things that I obviously was able to practice, was able to experiment with. And I just think it can go a long way in the sense of building a program, whether it's high school, club, or collegiately, in a few areas that I think are often overlooked, but it's greatly talked about, right? But a couple things that I know that I want to hopefully pass on, and hopefully there's takeaways, is obviously, what does it mean to build a vision of long-term success? I use sustainability because technically, it meaning the program should move on and move forward, whether I'm there or not, whether the head coach is there or not. And for long-term sustainability, I think we all have to, as coaches, we have to think about how are we setting up the next coach? And I'll talk about that a little bit later. The making of the who should you go after in terms of staffing and players and whatnot. How to build a brand, not so much how, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but how did I kind of establish a brand of basketball for my athletes. I think recruiting is a huge thing. So we'll touch on a couple of those things. And obviously, players commit to us for an amount of time, right? If it's high school, 4 years. If it's 2-year college, it's 2 years. AAU, it could be seasons or whatnot. But I think no matter what, it's creating a philosophy that those kids are committed to you for a certain amount of time, but then, you're committed to them for a lifetime, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. As you know, I mean, I think we're all watching the Michael Jordan docuseries, right? And I think he said something that I wanted to kind of reflect on. He said that playoff basketball is the highest form of competition, right? For pros, is getting into the playoffs, competing for a championship. That's obviously when your best basketball is being played. Well, I took a little spin on this, and I'm an assistant coach. I'm a lifelong assistant. I feel I've been a head coach in certain areas and certain capacities. But I think our highest form of competition as a coach is when you get your shot being a head coach, being able to call the shots. What you're seeing on screen right now is the amount of assistants per head coach in each of those divisions. Obviously, there's way more assistant coaches. So when coaches do take an opportunity, or an opportunity presents itself to say, hey, I'm a head coach now, and here's the opportunity that you're given, I fully believe that more times than not, positions create themselves for the right person. And I think as coaches, we're always trying to better ourselves. We're always trying to expand our skill sets. And over time, we have to understand that we are going to take advantage of an opportunity that presents itself. I had that opportunity present itself. I was probably about 10 years into my career, and I had an opportunity to take over a D2 program. And when I was going through the process of interviewing and kind of doing my research, I looked at that opportunity and compared it to the opportunity that obviously I was currently in. But at the same time, what my trajectory as a coach was. I actually turned that position down. I looked at it as an opportunity, but I also looked at it as kind of it could have been a detriment to my trajectory. I looked at the funding, what they were wanting us to do. They wanted us to be a top 3 program in the conference, yet they were funding at a bottom 3 or a bottom third money wise. And so I looked at how much learning did I have to make on the job of that position what that risk was for my trajectory, and I turned it down. I stayed at LMU. I had 2 more great seasons with LMU, but I don't regret that, because I think as coaches we have to understand that we're either ready for something, that we're bringing the skill sets to the table, but we're also bringing the opportunity to learn on the job. And I just felt that position, I was going to learn too much on the job, and it was going to sacrifice maybe a trajectory for my career. So I think that's all decisions that we have to make. And it kind of goes into, what I want to talk about today is the fact that, there are plenty of opportunities out there for us coaches. But if you don't make the opportunity and make a positive out of that opportunity, you could very well rewrite the trajectory line of your coaching career. So that's all I wanted to kind of touch on with this stat, is just knowing that, or just seeing really how many assistants, and this is kind of cutthroat. Here's the business side. How many assistants are gunning for you to fail? And so as a head coach, as a leader of a program, as even an assistant coach, how are you protecting what the head coach is laying out? How are you protecting their legacies, but also writing your own for your opportunity? Couple of the things that obviously I want to talk about with the vision is I think the vision is the most important thing. When I left LMU and found myself kind of with the Damon Bailey and Ron Patbergs of the state, and within their program, their club program, it was the first time that I really saw what a vision collegiately needs to be for youth basketball, youth coaches, high school coaches, and whatnot. And so I was able to really learn, what is this all about? And for every division, there's a separating factor, right? So for high school, what are they really trying to do? They're trying to prepare their athletes to earn a scholarship, to get a great education, and put them in a situation where they can succeed in college. What is club doing? Club is assisting that, and hopefully adding more exposure for those players and more advocacy for those players to college coaches so that they can find the right home, the right fit. What are we doing? Well, a lot of it's not basketball. A lot of it's not the X's and O's, but how are we trying to set our athletes up for the real world, for perhaps playing pro, but also teaching the skill sets that are needed to be successful, not only in the classroom, not only on the court with their teammates, but also just in life with family and whatnot. And I think, when both Ron and Damon's kids, obviously got into college, I was asked to kind of reinvent the Indiana Elite program under a new kind of umbrella than it used to be. And a lot of times that, what I learned is through the times prior is that players, the one thing they're looking for is a coach, someone they can believe in, that can expand their game and ultimately get them to their aspirations. What do parents want? Parents want a coach or people around their son or daughter that can help get them to the aspirations. That's it. I mean, I'm really dumbing it down. Obviously, there's other things like safety and wellness and whatnot, but to have a vision of what you want to put out there is so vital. So when I was trying to help reestablish the Indiana Elite program for girls, it was really what are we trying to do, right? What is that dominating that other person all about? And for us, it was just about developing players and getting them exposure. That is what we were going to hang our hat on. When I took over the program at Chandler Gilbert, it was in Region 1 of the NJCAA, and a very tough conference because you play against D1 and D2 two-year schools. But there was really four schools that were established, 2 Division 1s and 2 Division 2s. So what was going to be my shtick, right? I'm coming from out of state, taking over a program that didn't leave me with any players, but it's also a program that won two championships in the past, but has kind of been dormant. So what I tapped into is, what do I want those players, those parents, to be about in the end. I wanted my players to move on. So they were coming to me for 1 year to 2 years and then moving on to the next place. I wanted to make sure that the environment, I was all about gear, right? Like you find out like what's important to players and what's important, what kind of environment do you want to establish for those players and for those parents. And so my whole vision, and whether it's as an assistant or taking over a program, is about taking over a vision or an established place or role and change it into your own. And I think if you don't have the vision going in to a position, to an opportunity, you're kind of missing the boat, because you have to have the end game in mind so that you can work backwards and reverse engineer to what you want to do, right? So the vision for me was very important in the sense of the environment I wanted to create, the type of environment and the exposure that I wanted to give those players. But ultimately, it was literally about this wish, this experiment that I wanted to do, right? The next thing is who do you make it with, right? The first people that I think about, and this might be kind of not where most coaches will go, players, it was staffing. I wanted to make sure that I align with the right people that complement me, that can carry through that vision, but also protect the vision. Because a lot of times, and as assistants, I think we are kind of stuck, right? We're stuck between the head coach and then the other assistants, but we're also stuck between a head coach's vision and then your past experiences. And I think it's very easy, and I think you see it all over the place, whether it's on Twitter or on social media or just the talk of the Final Fours. There are assistants coaches out there that are very cutthroat. They want their own head coach to essentially fail so that they can have the job. I mean, that's what's happened in the past, even at Pepperdine. And so I think it's very, very important that as a leader of a program, a leader of a club, a high school, college, pro, is that you hire the right staff that protects the vision, protects what you ultimately want to try, what you want to practice, and then what you want to become. For me personally, there's two things that I needed. I needed a recruiter, someone who was obviously out and getting the landscape of the athletes out there, but I also needed teachers, the ones who will teach the game, develop position-wise, position coaches that will teach it in the way that I wanted our players, our program to represent. At the 2-year or the club level, you're only as good as the players that leave, and you're only as good as what the reputation of those players are at their next spot. So I wanted to make sure that our staff understood that we are literally building athletes for the next, not so much us. We wanted to build athletes that could succeed at the college level. We wanted to create athletes who could succeed at the pro level, whether I was at a 4-year school or not. So that was my number one. My number two is obviously the athletes. And I think, there's a couple measuring sticks that I know we look at, but every division, every conference, it has an equation to win, right? What wins in the Big Ten may not win in the SEC, and it probably doesn't win in the ACC or the Big East or the West Coast Conference. Like every conference, whether it's high school, college, there is an equation. I think as coaches, you have to understand what the equation is, because there are some things out there that won't fly at certain schools, but they will fly at others. So attributes and skill is so important to, I think, building a program, but at the same time, it's building the behaviors that then lead to the culture, right? So what attributes are important to us? Clearly, we want energy, right? We want players who are juiced to get juice from us as coaches. We want attitude, a great attitude, someone who has the approach that says that I can say like, hey, so-and-so, I'm going to come beat you up right now. All right. I'm going to bring it. Got your tough skin on? And they know that I'm just there because I'm there challenging them because they told me what their aspirations are. Right. And the next thing is, I think, toughness, being able to physically and mentally play the level that you are teaching. So in tough high school conferences, the EYBL or the Under Armour or, any of the Adidas, any of those leagues, you got to be a certain kind of tough to get through them. And then obviously college is college. And I think, from my experiences, for a player who may need to go to 2-year and have to, tap into a little bit of that pride thing. A lot of players think because they go JUCO that they're a failure when they're not. They just want to expand their game a certain way, whether it's mental, physical, emotional. Maybe there's something with family that they had to stay home. Maybe it's, they're overseas or whatnot. But I think what's very important as coaches is that we define what is needed for that equation, right? Obviously, IQ is a big thing. Being able to execute, being able to carry through and commit to a vision. The vision of a coach is the vision for upper classmen. Any of those. I mean, they all go through it. And then obviously skill's important. What skill is needed for any given matchup within the conference or level that you play that equates to that equation that we talked about? I mean, it's all in line, right? And so I think the more you can study your competition allows you to get the right staff, allows you to get the right athletes. And I think the one big lesson that we learned when we were at Loyola Marymount is things kind of shifted, right? The generation was shifting right around 10, 11, 12. And we knew that we had to go recruit parents. Parents are the biggest support system in everything. It is how we rebuilt the Indiana Elite program, now Team Indiana. We focused on parents, we focused on families, and then how that relates to obviously the athletes. The other thing that we kind of learned at LMU is the fact that, parents, even though we want them to be the support, are often the crutch. So how do you communicate with parents? How do you involve them? How do you make sure that they are always being included in everything you do? A lot of things we did, whether it was the club or at Chandler Gilbert, is they were on an email list. Every week they got something, whether it was travel, whether it was just touch and base, whether it was, at Chandler Gilbert, and this is something I think easily high schools and clubs can do, we got parents to sponsor certain meals after games so that then there were team building time, right? Just hanging out with players and hanging out with staff and hanging out with parents adds to those behaviors that are important to a coach that then relates to obviously the culture that you want to implement. So I think after the vision, it's obviously you got to fill in the who. And for us, it was always these 3 areas that were important to us. The next thing is what do you want your brand to be? Now, I think to that equation talk, everything has a motivating or inspiring factor, right? Technically for us as coaches, we don't want the kid that we have to motivate. We rather have the kid that we can inspire, right? The self-motivation is key. I think that's what we're hearing with the Jordan documentary is that, when you are self-motivated, the things on the court are endless because as a coach, all you have to do is now establish, like, what do you want your brand to mean? For me, there was 3 levels of the brand. The first level of the brand was what product are we putting on the court with that current team? That is something that was important to us. The next level was what do our athletes mean to the coaches that are going to get them? So whether that's club, 2-year, think about at a 4-year school, you're wanting to pass the buck to the pros. What's that brand of our players, of our style of play, of the work ethic? And it goes back to all those attributes and skills that you're recruiting. And the final thing is what do you want your brand to be for recruits? Like recruits, like I don't care if you're a high school or club. you're recruiting. You're recruiting with your brand. You're recruiting with the optics. You're recruiting with what they don't really know from the deep end of the pool, but they know from the shallow end, right? And I think a lot of times when you establish a brand, you have to then pick and choose where you want to use it. These are examples of what we kind of used for themes as we were building our long-term vision and a long-term brand. We had short-term themes that we wanted to make sure we touch on. So I'll give you an example of the Coyote. We were the Coyotes at Chandler Gilbert, and the EAT together was a big thing. And EAT is standing for us. It was standing for energy, attitude, and toughness. That was my year 2, kind of the look in terms of like what we were trying to do, because when I took over that program, I was left with no players, 0. And so I had to recruit 17 kids in a matter of about 6 weeks from May to the middle of June just to get kids in. But knowing that a lot of those kids probably wouldn't have made it. We literally only had 6 players return to the next team out of that 17 because they just figured it out, right? They figured out the brand that you're putting out, the work ethic that's needed. You kind of flush out how serious kids are with that next step, whether it's playing in college for club and high school coaches or playing pro for college coaches. But we knew we were getting a good group, a good core in that we can build on, and the returners were just facilitators. The top picture is from Fast and Furious. I don't know if you all are fans, but so this was an activity that we turned into kind of how are we going to establish the brand for that season. I asked the players, who are we in this picture? We knew that a few teams were the cars in front, right? Like they were just kind of leading the pack. A lot of our players thought that we were the little white car or that what is that back there? That SUV back there. And I posed the question to them. And again, this is kind of establishing that brand, that theme for that year as it relates to long-term, is why couldn't we be the submarine? And for us, that was huge. It was almost a light bulb for our players. And that entire season, even though we weren't winning the championship that season, we were on this huge push that allowed my players, my staff, to then practice what the vision was. And it was, we are going to flip tables and we are going to try to get what we want by just doing what we do, and no matter what. That no matter what glass we had to break through, right? Meaning kind of the ice there. So it was really good for year 2. Now the one that's in the box, the Waves, ironically enough, that I became a Wave at Pepperdine, but we used this my 3rd season. And what I did was I just took a snapshot of just the Waves and that set coming in. And the point of it was it's all about perspective, right? We were on the verge of really making a statement that year. We were getting big time recruits. We were winning recruits from the top 2 teams, which for us, that was a barometer. So what our goal was to give the players a mindset of relentless energy. And if you think about relentless, something that never quits, and energy, that's where the Waves come in. I mean, it's constant. And so the same type of exercise that we did with the submarine, I panned out and I said, well, where are we on the shore? And if you look closely, I know it's small, but on the shore, there's the surfer who's ready to just, charge. You got some people on the back because they're a little afraid of the size of the waves and just what they look like. You got others that are grouped up together and whatnot. And so our theme became that obviously we're going to bring that endless energy, but at the same time, if you're going to categorize one of us down here or down at the bottom, we were always the people in the groups that we were going to be there if we needed to, but at the same time, we're not in fear. And so that was kind of that theme for that season. Now, in those 3 years, I was 0-29 my first season. Yeah, 0-29. So didn't win a ball game, right? And that's where you, I think, choose when you're building that brand and building the culture. You got to determine, and you got to have some self-awareness, like what worked, what is worth fighting for, and then what do you have to scrap and kind of go find something new. That's what those seasons go through. And it's kind of a pet peeve of mine when coaches are like, you learn in different situations. I think you learn about your philosophies in those losing situations, because you're kind of searching on them all the time. But if you don't have these themes throughout the year and these big level themes, my team, that first team, could have easily just quit. I mean, we had some shit going on, right? Like we had some bad stuff go on. We had to make some decisions. We were going through, I mean, after losing 10 games, you're thinking like, man, the win's coming. It wasn't coming. And so, you gotta, as a coach, you have to have those things that keep them engaged, keep them inspired, even going through that losing season. Now, the one thing that I'm so proud of is that those teams that made it through at the end of the season, and again, I'm thinking brand, people were coming up to our team, myself, our staff, saying, how do you get those players to play so hard and so smart at the end of the season when they're 0-28 and they're playing their last game? And simply, it's because those two things were part of the vision, and those two things we were dead set on it being our brand. And so that's what it became. We were able to attract better players. And then that third season, it was the first winning season in about a decade. It was the first time we made the playoffs at a winning record in about 12 years. First time we were ranked in about 9. So in just such a short period, we were able to flip the script so much that it became where people wanted to go. And the one thing I'll end with the brand thing, and I'm taking it back to Indiana, is Team Indiana now is a place. It's a people, it's a group, it's an entity, organization, however you want to get, team, that literally it still lives the vision that we set forth way back when we were discussing what do we want to build. And that's why I think the vision is so important as it relates to the process of then reverse engineering into building a program. I think, and this is now obviously the recruiting piece in the sense of more collegiate, but the reason why I'm touching on the recruiting mainly after a branding talk is because even at the high school level, club level, collegiate level, you are recruiting to your brand. We all know that players will transfer for the shiny. They will transfer for the good. They will transfer for something what their parents heard, at a restaurant because another parent was talking about the program or the team or whatnot. So I think there's a few things for us anyways that we focus on as it relates to the recruiting after the brand is established. And so I always say, we are all products of our experience, and that product is our story. And I think no matter what, I had a great gym at Chandler Gilbert. Like, I think it was the best gym of the 12 schools in the conference, and yet they were losing right prior to me getting there. And so it's not the gym that we were trying to sell. At Pepperdine, I mean, when I take this down, you'll see the background. I mean, the ocean, like everywhere that you can see. That is not what we're selling. That's the easy, right? What I think any program, any coach, you don't find the shiny stuff. I think what you have to do is promote the people, because the shiny never lets anyone down. It's the people that let people down, right? And so for us, what I wanted to sell is obviously experience. I talked about turning down that opportunity. If I took that opportunity, I don't know if I would have been in Indiana. I don't know if I would have had the opportunity to find Chandler Gilbert as an opportunity. I probably wouldn't have found my way back to the WCC as it relates to this route. And so my experience is after I turned that down, I was able to fly. I was able to get ready to lead a program. And I think part of who we are as coaches is obviously our story. Obviously the skill sets are important, but the story is the most important thing, because you got to be able to sell that as it relates to the product you're putting on the court, and then what you're doing at practice or even, beyond. Player development. Player development is what we try to sell, because, I'm going to be kind of tough on us as coaches. I think as a whole, as a pulse, and I'm talking collegiately, but it's also club and high school, because it's the preparation of it. I don't know the numbers on the men's side, but on the women's side, last year there was over 750 transfers. This year there was over 1,000 transfers. So someone's not doing their job. And a lot of it is because, coaches aren't investing in the player, whether it's on the court, player development, or investing in the player as it relates to off the court. And that is just connecting, right? I mean, we're in a very transactional world, but we got to change that transaction and move it towards where it's very relational. And kids are transferring now left and right. And I think it's a bad sign. And so as you sell, as you prepare for that brand, as you prepare for kind of the what comes next after you start establishing everything, is really what do you want to hang your hat on? For me, it was the player development. It was the X's and O's. And then it was the fact that, I was lucky. I coached all across the country. I was in Louisiana, Kentucky, New York, Indiana, obviously out here, Arizona, everywhere in between. So I had the luxury, maybe the benefit of knowing a lot of coaches out there. So I was able to expose and advocate for my club, my two-year athletes or whatnot. So I think that is kind of, obviously it worked for me. It's not for everybody. I'm going to go back a little bit as coaches. This was told to me by a mentor of mine. With coaching in general, you got to be able to recruit. You got to know your X's and O's, and you got to know how to develop players. Those three things. Now, what he also said is choose 2 of the 3 for your first 10 to 12 years. You're going to be all right. You're going to have a long, sustainable career, because then you get known for something. Early in my career, I was shy. I didn't like talking to people. I thought it was weird calling a kid that's like, not that younger than me and trying to pull information. I didn't know what information I should have asked for. I didn't know how to move someone through the touch points of recruiting. And so I just shied away from it. And I went all into X's and O's and player development. And that's what I became known as. What I also figured out is I was always saying yes to the people who were good at the recruiting. So I was always in the recruiting visits with our staff, with our recruiting coordinator and the head coach. And I was just kind of a tag along, but I was just taking everything in. And it turns out that when I was ready, meaning the Indiana piece and the Arizona piece, that I was able to communicate what my vision is, what I wanted my expectations to be of the players, of the parents, of my staff. I kind of already had a fluidity of kind of what you see, which is the player development and X's and O's, and the recruiting piece came easy by that time, 20 years in. And so I think, being able to articulate your vision as it relates to this recruiting piece or for youth coaches back into the brand of basketball that you're trying to establish, you got to hang your hat on some things. Now, the other thing is I'm never going to recruit an athlete and not their parents, and I'm not going to recruit the parents outside of the athlete. And I think where parents go, in all of those years that I was just observing, at LMU and Cornell and all that, it was like I was looking at what moves people. And I think coaches should do this, not just with parents. This is my example, but also with your players. I think we're all good at kind of like putting up the stat or putting up the the film or putting up kind of that motivational thing, but are you really observing how it's moving everyone in the room? Because what moves one player may not move the next. And one picture, you should be able to tap into every player on your team or every recruit or every family or every parent in a way that you can figure out what actually moves them, because what moves them is the answer of how you need to treat them for the 4, the 2, the 1, the 3 years that they're with you. And so with parents, for us, it's like we kind of knew that all these parents want is just the health, well-being, and wellness of their daughters. For me, for women's basketball, they want their daughter to achieve their aspirations, to be able to say, you know, wow, like my daughter is with that group of folks and look what she achieved. And if it's beyond what that parent assumed, that's great. The problem is that parent probably assumed that you weren't going to hit it. And that, I think that's the problem. And so, but you can always use parents as a sounding board, whether it's engagement or involvement or even just the educational piece. Like I became an educator. You know, I think we all do at some point where you do something for so long, it just becomes kind of who you are. And so when I was working with the elite, when I was working with Chandler Gilbert, even now, anytime I get on the phone with an athlete, with a parent, with really just whoever will listen, to be honest, I'm trying to educate them on the process and using the ability or the platform to do so. So that's where I think, you know, athletes and parents, and I know for youth, I mean, we experienced it at Center Grove and not so much with the club, but it's because we recruited parents. Parents are involved, and they should be. I mean, like their air is with you. And I think for coaches who don't think like, they don't need to be involved, they need to be involved. They want to be involved. And I think you just got to find the way to involve them, because what parents say around the dinner table, what parents say at the diner, what parents say at church, what parents say at the grocery store goes back to your brand, goes back to your vision, goes back in representation of your players, your staff, and they are the biggest recruiters. Players and parents are your biggest recruiters outside of who you are and what you do. So the last thing I have is obviously my dad's from Hawaii, so that's the reason why I use Ohana. But it goes back to kind of the point I was making earlier is, you know, we are in this business, a very relational business. It's a business that is a forever for us, but it might not be a forever for athletes and players. I think it's very unique when you get a situation where you were able to bring in players who had adversity, parents who had adversity, but then coming out of it, they're always family, right? And that's the thing, that's the one aspect that I don't think enough coaches, whether it's collegiately or high school, I don't think we think about our legacy enough as it relates through the eyes of our parents and players. I think we're really good at trying to prepare for the next game or designing a practice plan or a workout plan for our players. We're very good at that. Like that, it comes. But as it relates to what our legacy is going to be long term, if you're not a relational person, it's going to come out fake or weird, right? It's going to come off that way. But if you are a relational person, don't allow the level, don't allow the game, don't allow the situation to change that and turn it into a transactional relationship. Because I do think some of the pictures that you see, you know, the bottom right and the middle are kids that, you know, played at LMU that then came to my wedding. I mean, that's our life, right? The player in the left was the LMU. The right is a player I coached at Chandler Gilbert. She now plays at a 4-year in San Diego, came out and watched us when we played USD. And then obviously the top pictures are just what it means to me anyways of having parents involved, because this is what they're going to remember. They're going to remember how you treated their son or daughter. They're going to remember what you did for them, how you prepared them, but also how help them through certain situations. And like I said, it's got to be part of the vision that you lay out early before you even, I mean, that's when you put pen to paper early. And I had a great experiment that I was able to touch on both at a club level, but then also at a 2-year level, collegiate level. I was able to practice some philosophies. I mean, I go back, Ben and Jeff, like what you guys are putting on, it's awesome, right? Like we're able to go and learn and expand our skill sets and do everything we need to do for our players, for our parents, for our programs. But I think in the end, what we can't forget about, or what we have to kind of keep in that forefront, is you've got to be ready for that position, for that opportunity when it presents itself. And if you're not ready, that's where you're going to struggle. That's where you're going to hit some speed bumps. But it's a constant thing. I think in the areas that we talked about today, obviously vision is very important in the sense of what are you trying to move towards. The people within it is vital. I mean, without them, you're just a coach on the sideline, just standing looking at space. I think knowing your brand and how to focus on long-term, using short-term themes to keep players and parents and recruits and your staff bought in and inspired to keep moving forward. And then obviously knowing your story, knowing how to communicate it and sell it and be it. But then in the end, I think it's just long-term connectability with our players and staff. So, I welcome any questions if there's any questions, but here's how you can connect with me. I'm all about it. I am very fortunate that, I've had a career like I did in coaching all across the country. I've met some great people, continuing to make contacts and connections with people. But I'm very humbled that I was able to do this with you all and give back to the game in Indiana.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I've got 2 questions. The first one is, I saw on Twitter you said Pepperdine. You said the most beautiful campus. Is that true? I haven't been there. Is that really true, or you just say that?
No, I think it's I do think it is the truest of what's out there, but obviously it's the eye of the beholder, right? Like I'm from the coast. I need to see ocean. I love to see ocean. And so anytime I can walk around campus and see it, I mean, it's a good thing for me. And I think that's the kind of the thing. It's like, that sells itself, and if we were the coaches that don't support that and don't support the players, the athletes, whether they can see the ocean or not, or whether they think it's the most beautiful campus in the country or not, it doesn't matter, right? Because they're just running with bad folks.
Mm-hmm. And so let's say we had a recruit come to Pepperdine, and what would be some of the things you would show them first?
Yeah, I think for us, it's always, I mean, that's kind of a culminating factor of touch and base to try to understand, what's important to them, what are they looking for in a school and whatnot. I think the 3 areas that we want to make sure they understand when they do come to campus is obviously the educational side. What does it look like? Where are the classrooms? Where's the CAF? Where's all the resources that they need to have, whether it's the resource center, the library, things like that. It's obviously the residential areas and how it relates to how it complements the academic piece. But then obviously the facilities and just the basketball portion, right? I mean, like the film room's not so bad to look at. Obviously we have a great arena, and we're in the works of breaking ground for a new arena. And so, things are just happening. And so we want to make sure that on campus, can they see themselves on it, functioning well, succeeding, and can the parents feel like, hey, they're in good hands because it's a safe campus. It's a campus that my daughter, my son can function. And so ultimately that's kind of what we're wanting to get out of those 3 areas that we show them.
Thank you. Ben, your turn.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a quick follow-up. I was doing like a virtual tour, kind of flyover by of the campus, and like it's all like all encompassing, like the residential for faculty, staff, they have their own, and then everybody lives there basically.
Yeah, so it's kind of a unique thing. I mean, when you do a flyover, like looking down, you don't really see the tiers that it's built on, right? Like we kind of have different tiers. So the first tier is kind of the athletic facilities. It's the gymnasium, it's the baseball, soccer fields, the performance center. You know, all of that is like one level. Then up above it is the academic piece. Just above that is the residential. And then above that is the kind of the grad school and the grad housing, along with what you brought up. 30% of our faculty actually live on campus. And a lot of it is like, why are you going to shy away from beachfront property? But the same thing is, it's just, that's what Pepperdine is. It is like, it's built on a mission of community, of being part of a conversation, as opposed to like, hey, I'll see you Monday type of thing. And so it's a very unique, it's a unique campus in the sense of like everything you get in such a small area. I mean, it's built into a canyon, and so you have the luxury of it being kind of that, you know, off and kind of on its own in Malibu, but then you have Santa Monica about 8 miles away if you wanted it, you know, so it's best of both worlds, I think.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool. You talked about the transfers, you know, 1,000+ transferred. A lot of coaches over the last couple of months have talked about continually recruiting your own players. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one thing that, you know, we consciously did this season. Coming in, obviously we were the new staff. We were a different staff, different personality, different experiences all coming together. We were inheriting a program, like I said, that was very senior heavy. So we knew that the 2020 class was going to be a lot of work, but you don't want to just focus on that one class. You got to prepare for the 21 class. But the class that took the top priority was our players. So in a priority list, it was our players, 20s, and then 21s. And I don't think it's wrong to say that, because in a season or in a year that really all of our players could have left, maybe should have left, in the sense of like they weren't recruited by us, right? Like this would be the season. None of them did. And so I think it was because we were consciously thinking about, you know, who are they? How do they want to be coached? What are their aspirations? And then just coaching them up and being there for them, you know. And I often use the metaphor of like, you know, the slow drip in the sink. You know, you put a glass there and you're like, geez, how long will it take to fill the glass? But eventually it does fill the glass, you know. And I think that's what you saw when you watch us play. Very early, we were just up and down with like our turnover numbers, our rebounding numbers, our percentages and all that. And then towards the end of the season, we were very efficient, partly because they trusted us. We trusted them. They trusted each other. And it was all because we made a real mindful effort of recruiting those kids first before any player that's coming into it.
Awesome. And that's really all I had, except for everything, I guess, does lead back to Indiana. You know, like you said, all great things come from Indiana, so basketball-wise. But I appreciate you taking the time, and it was great to hear your perspective as well. So hope we can stay in touch. And I'm going to be out there sometime, so I'll hit you up.
No, please do. I mean, obviously, you guys are always welcome. Keep doing this. I mean, I think it's not just the coronavirus era that we should be doing it. Like, we should just be holding these, and whether they're weekends during the season and whatnot. But I think you guys are doing a great job. I think it's needed. It's needed for the game. But ultimately, and I've always said this, like, if I can bring now Indiana to California, I mean, I'm looking for those kids, you know.
There we go. Like I said, I'm right here. So
there you go. There you go.
But I'll bring whoever I can. So
perfect.
We'll talk soon. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.